This stole was made in one of the hospitals in the Gaza Strip that has now been destroyed. Yeah. And of course, even as we are focusing also on Gaza this morning, a lot of what's happening and has been happening in the Gaza, of course, is in response to what happened on the 7th of October a few years ago, with thousands of Israelis being killed through. And so there's darkness everywhere on both sides and all of this stuff. So how on earth can the light of Christmas prevail against that? Well, so Jesus kind of has some superpowers, right? Now, he's got quite a few of them. He does miracles. He can walk on water. He heals people. But I think his greatest ever superpower is love. And there is a reason why the Bible associates the love of Jesus with the light of the world. Because love will always win out. And this is already true from the very first moment when Jesus is conceived in Mary's womb. I want to take us in the next few minutes through some of the dark points in these infant stories of Jesus, the stories of Christmas, just to point out where there is darkness there, and that it is very clearly that Jesus came into all of these dark places, in the peoples whose lives he touched even before he was born. I want to begin with Matthew, the first reading. And, with Luke, the first reading. So here we learn that when Jesus is presented at the temple, his parents bring an offering, and the offering that they bring is turtle doves. Have you ever wondered why we're told that it's turtle doves? Well, this is actually a quotation from the book of Leviticus that stipulates that when a male firstborn is born to an Israelite family, they're supposed to bring their child dedicated to God, as Mary and Joseph are doing here, and then they are actually supposed to offer a lamb. And then comes this verse. And when the parents don't have enough money, they can bring some turtle doves. So the first dark place that I see here is that Jesus is actually born to a family of poor parents. They're so dirt poor, they can't afford a lamb. They bring some doves to God. And that's okay. So there's the first dark place. The second dark place, I think, is actually we encounter with Simeon. Now, he has this revelation from God, and he's given hope against the background of the darkness of his occupied Judah, of the ancient part of Israel where Jesus was born into, that was occupied by foreign forces. There's darkness right there. He's looking for light. He's looking for the Messiah, and God promises him, the Messiah will come before you, next darkness, before you die. And then, of course, he shares his great and wonderful poem, Now You Let Your Servant Go in Peace. Guess where he is going? To his grave. There's darkness there again. Then we move on to the Gospel of Matthew, and we have two readings there. And the first reading is where before Jesus is even born. And he is born, or so Joseph thinks, out of wedlock. And we are told that Joseph, being a righteous man, decides to quietly dismiss Mary and separate from her. Guess what the alternative would have been? If he was not a righteous man, and he would do what the normal prescription for a situation like this, like, you are engaged to a woman, and then the woman has a baby with what looks like from another man. That's considered adultery in ancient Israel. And guess what the husband-to-be can then demand? That she be killed. And this is, I think, why the angel has to say to Joseph, don't be afraid to marry her, because if he did marry her and it came out that the baby was not from him, he would lose face. He would be shamed. He would be despised in his community. More darkness there. And if Joseph had insisted, Mary could have been killed. And Jesus in the womb of Mary would have been killed. Darkness right there. I mean, think about this. Yeah, if the angel had not appeared to Joseph, and if Joseph had not been a righteous man, Jesus would have been killed right there, together with his mom. And then, of course, we get to the story about the wise men from the east. And as a consequence of that, of course, Herod then finds out there is a rival king born, and while we have not actually read as far in the story, you know, of course, what happens next, right? What happens next is that all of the babies and infants in ancient Bethlehem were killed by Herod's henchmen. So we don't exactly know how many babies there were. Modern Bethlehem, Reverend Scott can correct me if I'm wrong here, but modern Bethlehem is not that big, and I would imagine ancient Bethlehem would be even smaller. But even if it was a relatively small place, we can gather there would certainly have been several dozen babies and infants up to 2 years old that would have been killed as a consequence, not of Christmas, but as a consequence of the darkness into which Christmas happened. Yeah? When the light of Christmas, the light of Jesus, the light, comes into the darkness of Herod's kingdom, darkness tries to fight back. And we then learn two things actually surround this that I think bring light, but only partial light, into this situation. The first thing is, God then sends an angel and warns Joseph in another dream, Herod is after the baby, go and flee to Egypt. And they do, and they escape. And what's really good, so that's the first kind of streak of light there. The second streak of light is that before they even flee, have you noticed God provides for this young family? Because God sends people from modern day Iran or Iraq to bring gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So when they become refugees, here's another darkness, right? They become refugees in a foreign country. When they do that, they are not destitute. They have something to fall back on and survive until they can safely come back once Herod is dead. Thank God for that, right? Did the pastor just said that? Yeah, he did. Okay. All right. So, but there is still darkness there. So God intervenes twofold for Jesus and his family, mom and dad. He brings gold, frankincense, and myrrh. He sends an angel to warn them so they escape by the edge of their teeth. But what about the poor babies and infants that remain in Bethlehem? If God could intervene and save Jesus, why didn't he intervene and save those babies and their moms and dads and their older brothers and sisters? God brings in Jesus and through Jesus light into the darkness. And the darkness cannot prevail against it. But the darkness is still there. And you may feel it in your own life right now. What is so amazing to me is that in spite of the evil in humanity, sometimes even my own evil, my own fallenness, my own darkness, Jesus is there. Jesus overcomes it. The darkness cannot overcome the light. The darkness cannot even prevail against the light. I'll come back to that in a moment. But I want to say something about those, let's say, 2 or 3 dozen babies and infants that were killed, not as a consequence of Christmas, but as a consequence of the darkness in this world. God, for whatever reason, and as you know, sometimes I get cross with God, and I sometimes want to take my Bible and throw it against a wall, and this is one of those texts that kind of does that to me. God, in whatever wisdom of God that he has, decided not to save those babies and those infants. I have no idea why, but I hope I'll have the guts to ask God when I get to heaven, if I get there. But I want us to look at this from a different perspective for a moment. So, do you think those babies went to heaven? Do you think any babies who die, like the ones that were killed on 7th of October in Israel, like the babies that were killed in the Gaza Strip since? Yeah, I think so too. And this is the amazing thing here. So the Christian church has been commemorating and honoring those, what in the Christian tradition we call those holy innocents. Those innocent babies who died, if you think about it, they died for Jesus, didn't they? The Christian church has celebrated those babies for 2,000 years. Every time, first Sunday after Christmas, the service is dedicated to those holy innocents. And they are the first martyrs for Jesus. We often tend to think it's Stephen in the book of Acts, but actually it's those babies. And this may sound a little bit odd when I say it, but I want to say it nonetheless. What a way to die. Dying for Jesus. Dying to expose the darkness of the world so that the light can come into it and overcome it. And I want to finish this exploration of the dark side of Christmas. And you can see there's a lot of darkness here. I want to finish this with a perfect, for me at least, perfect illustration that actually tells you just how powerful Jesus, the light of the world, actually is. Somebody shared this with me. I can't remember now which cave it is, but there is a huge cave system here somewhere in the United States. It's a huge, huge, huge cave. And of course, inside that cave, it has been, explored and everything else, and there's lighting everywhere. And people take tours. Thousands of people visit this cave every year. Some of you may know what it is. If anyone knows it, or anyone online knows it, send a text to Christina, our fabulous producer, and share it with us. But somebody visited this and shared this with me. And they took a tour, and there were dozens of people there. Huge cave system, huge. And then at one point during the guided tour, the people who ran this cave completely extinguished all of the lights. And just bear with me for a moment when I get my illustration.
It's Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico.
Ah, thank you, Bev. Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico. I want to go there, actually. This is on my bucket list. Carlsbad Caves in New Mexico. Great. Now, what happened is they extinguished all of the lights. And of course, in the cave, it was completely and utterly pitch dark. And then the guide lit a single match. And my friend who shared this story with me said, we were absolutely amazed. Because that little tiny match, I'm going to try and hold it as long as I can without burning my fingers. That tiny little match illuminated the entire cave, which was absolutely huge. And so, I want to say to you, don't let the darkness overwhelm you. Stay with the light. Stay close to Jesus. He is that little match. And another way of saying this is, and Jesus himself talks about this, he says, I give my power to the church, to you and me. And then he says, the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. The gates of hell. As you and I are following Jesus, and as we grow and absorb Jesus' superpower of love, there are millions and millions and millions of little walking lights on two legs who are bringing the love of God into every nook and cranny and cave and darkness of this world. Every time we are kind to someone else, every time we share the love of Jesus with someone else through word and deed, every time we resist to retaliate, every time we forgive, every time we hope, every time we experience Jesus all around us and within us, every single time we do this, we'll drive another blow at the gates of hell. And hell will not withstand against us. And with Jesus, our superpower, we will overcome it. And the darkness cannot prevail against us, because he cannot prevail against Jesus. Thanks be to God. Amen.